All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another React Wednesdays. My name is TJ VanToll. I work as a developer advocate here at Progress. And with me today again is Dan Wilson.
Hey, I'm Dan Wilson. I work for Digital Primates. We do enterprise React stuff. We also curate the enterprise React newsletter. So if it's the kind of thing you like, feel free to subscribe. We won't spam you.
Cool. And today we're excited to invite both Nathan Smith and Cory Webb here. So why don't you guys give us a little introduction. Tell us why you're famous, why you're here, what you guys have built.
Cory, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So, my name's Cory Webb. I'm a senior full-stack developer at Reactiv Studios, and we are a VIP partner, a WordPress VIP partner, which means that we work with the WordPress.com VIP hosting service, among other services, to provide custom WordPress development, which encompasses a lot of things like React development and PHP development and things like that. And so, that's me.
Cool. I am Nathan Smith. I'm a front-end developer at Reactiv and fairly new. I just started last December, so coming up on 8 months now. Joined just in time for COVID-19, yay. But yeah, recently Cory pitched me an idea and I said, yeah, I'll help out with that. And so back to you, TJ.
Yeah, so why don't you just introduce the idea, that the thing you guys built?
Yeah, so we built a tool. It's called Be a Speaker. The URL is beaspeaker.at, so .at. And it's a tool to help connect speakers or potential speakers with conference organizers to help speakers find opportunities to go and present their knowledge at conferences. And so it was really just a way for me to kind of scratch my own itch, right? I like to go out and speak at conferences, particularly WordCamps. So those are the WordPress conferences. And, one of the things that I found difficult over the years is finding out which ones have open calls for speakers. And so the idea kind of came to me, hey, why don't we create a tool we can kind of curate this list of calls for speakers to make it easier for people like myself to go out and find these things and find opportunities. And then also on the flip side of that, to help conference organizers find speakers and kind of cast a wider net to find people who can speak at their conferences.
Very cool. And actually, at this point, do you want me to toss your screen up so we can give the audience a visual of, do you want to give us a little tour of what it looks like?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll go ahead and toss it up here. And I'll say while you're getting that up too, that I think we were chatting before how we can definitely see a need from it. So I know Dan has some background from conference organizing. I've done a little bit of conference organizing myself and speaking. And I know the process is, I guess, haphazard at best would probably be how I describe it, where like sometimes conferences have CFP, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're in sometimes they want you to submit something on GitHub. Sometimes they want you to fill a Google form. Sometimes you just have to email somebody, and it's sort of a mess. And like you almost have to have like your own running calendar to keep track of these things. So I'm instantly intrigued by this.
Oh yeah, me too, because like I said, I've ran a conference for 10 years and I've helped plan other conferences that are, the Vegas style big shows. And there's not really been like a great way to match speakers in conferences. And there's not really a great way to intake speaker ideas. In fact, I chipped away at building an application that kind of made it easier for people to submit in the call for papers. And so during this show, I probably will suggest a few features and be more than happy to give you whatever code I've got. I'm sure you won't want it, but getting that process done for a conference that's the worst part of the organizing for me, was speaker wrangling.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've found is that every conference kind of does it differently in terms of how they take in speaker proposals. And so that's something that we weren't trying to accomplish. Like, we're not trying to consolidate that process. We're just basically providing a pointer that says, hey, this conference has opportunities. Here's a link to their form where you can go fill it out, right? And they all do it differently. And so, but yeah, so if you look at the site, it's pretty basic. if you scroll down, it's just a list of events, right? You can filter it. So if you want to filter it by like a location, you could say Italy, and the one that's in Italy pops up. And it's all done in React, so it's all pretty instantaneous. We have event types. Currently, the only event type is a WordCamp, because all the different React events that we put in place didn't really fall under like a type, like in the same way that WordCamps do. But if you select WordCamp, it filters out to only the WordCamps. And then topics. So this could be basically anything, right? We initially this was called technologies, but we felt like that was a little bit too limiting, right? Because conferences might not be talking about technology, right? They might be conferences that are a tech conference, but they're talking about business. They're talking about, how to grow your business or how to market your business. And so we wanted to make that a little bit more general. So, but we have topics and event types. So if you want to, look at React conferences, you just do that. And so, the WordCamps are still there because typically there's a lot of React talk at WordCamps these days, because it's within the WordPress community, React has really become kind of the standard that a lot of people are using for development, for front-end development like that. So, but then if you click on any event type, it'll take you to a page for that event, just with basic info about the event, and then an application link. So you can just click on that. It'll take you to the call for speakers. You can visit the event website for more information. If you click on WordCamp, it'll take you to a page for WordCamps that just pulls in WordCamps. So it's basically, we're trying to make it as easy as possible to find events that are relevant to what speakers want to talk about. And so, and then you'll notice on every page there's this button that says add an event. So any conference organizer can simply click on that, come in here and fill out the form with their name, email address, and some information about their event. And then we'll review those and then publish those once we've had a chance to review them. And so we want to make it super easy for conference organizers to be able to make use of this tool so that they can, easily, like I said, cast a wider net to find conference speakers with interesting information to share.
So
Gotcha.
Imagine that I am a speaker and I see an event. What's my workflow?
So really, this tool is just to help you find the events that have open calls for speakers. So your next step is going to be, so let's say you want to speak at Reactiv Conf 2021 in Prague. So you can just click on the application link, and that'll take you to that conference website's call for speakers.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's still open, right? So if you see there's a button here, you call for papers, you just follow whatever their instructions are, right? In this case, send an email to this email address with the talk name, the talks and names and abstracts in your bio. So that's their workflow, right? We're not doing anything to change their workflow. We're just helping you find their way of doing it. With WordCamps, it's similar. You just click on the call for speakers, and it's they have their own workflow as well. This one is in Italian, so I don't know what it says.
So for a speaker, actually, there's a couple words I can read in Italian. One is WordPress.
Uh-huh.
About the end of my Italian. That's right.
I had 2020. That's I got that one too.
Not bad. So as a speaker, what I'd want to do is kind of stay up to date with the stream and look for things that match my interests, and then I can kind of go to that conference site and then do their thing. This way I don't miss out on any potential events that I would like to speak at, but miss their tweets or their emails or whatever they're throwing into the air to kind of attract speakers.
Right. Yeah, and one of the good things about this too is, hopefully it'll help people find conferences that they wouldn't have thought about or wouldn't have ever heard about otherwise. And so, it's for me, I'm looking for opportunities to speak at WordCamps. Not necessarily looking at React conferences, but it's interesting to me to see the ones that are out there that are available, either to attend or to speak at. And so, it's kind of serves that purpose as well, to kind of just raise awareness of the conferences that are out there for different topics, different tech topics.
And you have a Twitter account. What is that used for?
The Be a Speaker Twitter account. Generally, it's we're using that just to kind of promote the service, to help people to find it, to help people see that this is available. We also want to use it to help promote conferences. So we're trying to follow the different conferences that we have listed, and we're trying to, anytime they tweet something interesting, especially relevant to speakers, we want to retweet that and help kind of amplify that. Yes, thank you.
So apart from offering this listing service, you're also providing some amplification services as well.
That's correct.
And then as a conference organizer, what do I have to pay for all this extra service?
You just PayPal me directly. Whatever you want to pay, but definitely needs to go through me, and then I'll make sure Cory gets his share.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we honestly didn't start this to make money off of it. We started it to. Frankly, I started it for selfish purposes, because I wanted to have a tool like this to be able to create a repository of speaking opportunities. But I thought, well, if I'm going to make it, I may as well make it useful for other people. So, payment wise, it's free. It doesn't cost anything. I mean, it costs you about 10 minutes to go fill out the add an event form, and then we will add it for you. So.
Yeah, I saw some people drop from the Twitch when I said you PayPal. It's absolutely free. I was joking.
Yeah, they were looking for their PayPal. Actually, they were going to send you some money.
Yeah, they'll be right back with
I'll give you my Venmo if you want to pay me something, but it's free.
Yeah, that's a great service, and thank you very much for doing it for the community. Go ahead, TJ. I've cut you off twice here. My apologies.
No, I definitely want to get into some of the technology behind this, but I think the question I have to ask here is, did all this go down before or after sort of COVID took over the world, and sort of how has that affected your planning and what you're doing with this?
So, conference season really kind of starts in the spring, at least in the WordCamp world. And so I started looking for these opportunities probably toward the end of last year. And this is kind of when the idea kind of started to percolate a little bit. And I presented the idea, and then Nathan was kind enough to say, sure, I'll help you with that. And so we sort of started on, he said, we started on it in January, around January or February maybe, and didn't really finish it until maybe mid-March. And unfortunately, that was kind of when COVID really started to become a big deal, right? I mean, it was already kind of a big deal, but it really started shutting everything down at that point. And so we decided to go ahead and proceed with it, just because I know that it's going to be useful. I know a lot of conferences are going to an online-only format, and they still need speakers. And then also, as things start to open back up, as the world starts to kind of to normalize over the next year or so, however long it takes, more and more conferences will start opening back up. And this will be a service that I think people will need.
Yeah, it's actually I really can think of a lot of potential here, because I'm even thinking like meetups and such as well. Like I know from my experience working with meetups that there's a constant need for getting speakers in. Have you thought about like allowing meetups to register themselves? Is that something your system would allow right now?
Yeah, for sure. I think as long as you just made that note that it's a meetup, there's nothing that would exclude you. Correct me if I'm wrong, Cory, but I think that's how it works, right?
I wouldn't see any issue with it. I mean, there's no technology in there that blocks the word meetup. So I think if it's a meetup, it's in it, and you need to find speakers for a meetup, I think it's relevant. I think one potential issue, right, is that there are thousands of meetups, and it could get kind of noisy. But I think with the filters that we have in place, as far as being able to find events and things like that, I don't think it'll be an issue. I think it would be easy enough to find what you're looking for. especially, if you're looking for certain topics or whatever. I see no problem with it.
Gotcha. So I want to get into the sort of technology behind this as well. So I know you're using WordPress for this too, along with React. You want to give like a brief overview of some of the tech that drives this and some of the stuff you're doing?
Yeah, so I can talk about the WordPress side. And so I guess, and Nathan can kind of get into the React side. So that's kind of how we split up the work. But, one of the good things about React is that as long as your backend speaks the right language, as far as like JSON or REST or whatever, it doesn't matter really what you use. And so WordPress made sense for us. That's what we do every day, and it's a CMS already, so we didn't have to put a whole lot of effort into building out the content management side of things. And so we built out the back end with WordPress, and the main step toward that would be to define a custom content type, or it's called a post type in WordPress, and then define custom fields that support that content type. And so we have a content type would be an event, and then the custom fields would be the city, the country, the date of the event. If they have a deadline for their call to speakers, we put that kind of information in there. So we enter that into there, made those fields available to the REST API. And then from there, that's where I guess the React side of things takes over. So I guess I'll let Nathan kind of.
Hey, Cory, what did you call that WordPress? Was it a custom post? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's a custom post type. So, without getting too deep into how WordPress works, WordPress is basically built on kind of an open-ended content architecture where it's called the main type of content is called a post. And then if you want to create another kind of object, another kind of data object, it's built on that post object, but you kind of extend it with other parameters and other custom fields. And so we call those post types. And so one type of post is called a post, right? And that's what we think of as a blog post or an article. Another post type is a page, and that's what is like a static page on a WordPress website. Those are the ones that are kind of built into core. There's others that are built into core, but those are kind of the two main ones. And then beyond that, there's a mechanism for extending that functionality to create other objects or other types of data objects, which, like I said, are called post types. And so that's how we approach that here.
So there's this base set of data that WordPress needs and wants, and you can basically extend that with your own things that will work inside WordPress because it matches up with this original interface, let's call it.
Correct. Yeah. And then as far as like the content management side of things, really it makes it really easy because all you have to, once you define that custom post type, it automatically generates the backend, the admin dashboard tools to manage content within that new custom post type. So we're not having to generate any kind of backend tools for managing that content. So that's one of the big reasons we chose WordPress in this instance, is because it cut out a lot of the work as far as creating those kind of pieces, where we could really just focus on the front end user experience for just finding the events people are looking for.
And part of it too was the amount of time, because we Cory said, "Hey boss man, can Nathan and I build this during company time?" And he's like, "Yeah, if it's not going to take a while, So that was another reason for going with something that's ready to hit the ground running.
I'm a big fan of pulling stuff off the shelf when it makes sense. There's no point in going down in the forest with an axe and cutting down your own 2x4s if you can buy them.
Absolutely.
We've actually been working on a theme that we call off the shelf. So when a client's like, "Well, can you just use an off the shelf theme for this?" We're like, "Yes, we can," and it's named that already.
That's great.
I love the name. Yeah, it's funny because I think like WordPress is, at least to me in my head, it falls into that bucket of tech that's sort of fallen off like on the hype curve, right? It's very much in the stable zone. So it's not something you see talked about it like general React conferences, for example, or general web conferences a lot, but it's still like a super stable technology that drives like an insane percentage of the internet. Like it's
like
a whole crap ton of
PHP
stuff runs on WordPress. So
PHP is the off-white beige color paint of the web, right? Like you don't get excited about it, but it's everywhere, so it's good bread and butter, right?
yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with using it. I think like the last time I mean I've touched WordPress, but it's been many years. So I'm curious, like I'm not really familiar with the React angle of this. So if you are using WordPress and React today, is that something where there are like pre-made templates? Like where do you go? Like if I want to start like WordPress and React, it's like, yes, I want to do this. Like where do I go? What do I do? What's my easiest starting point?
So, I mean, I guess the answer to any web question is it depends, right? But
That's right.
that is the answer to this question. But it's not super defined within the WordPress world as far as like how to approach it. I mean, there's a big push within WordPress towards using Gatsby, for example. A lot of people are using Gatsby for the front end and using like a Jamstack, build process to build out the front end, and then the WordPress server kind of sits on its own and really just works as the back end of the content management piece of it. But the front end is Gatsby, and there's GraphQL plugins for WordPress to make the GraphQL data available, or make the data available via GraphQL for the Gatsby front end. Or you could use the REST API as well. Depends on whatever flavor you like. But the way we approached it, I mean, we did kind of a hybrid approach here, where we're using a true WordPress install with a WordPress theme for the front end, and then we're embedding the React app on the front end within different pages of it. So it's not a full one-page app kind of thing. It's there's actually different pages being served from WordPress here with React kind of built into each of those pages. So it just kind of depends on how you want to do it or what you want to do and how you want to approach it. So I'm talking too much. I'm gonna let Nathan explain the React side of things.
Sure. I can share screen. Let me see. Share screen is easy with 2 monitors. So I'm just reading the tips. All right.
There you go. Yeah.
Can you see this one? See the code?
I can. Yep.
All right. So from the WordPress side,
we'll need you to bump your font size up.
Sure. Sorry. Let me do some better window management here.
I noticed. I'm a Divi fan as well.
Yeah.
I use that also.
I have a hotkey on my mouse too because I do this so much. All right. So here's from a PHP standpoint, what you need for a React app is you need an ID or somewhere to put the React. So we'll do reverse mullet. We'll do from the back to the front. So there's the PHP side, right? Anywhere you want the React portion to show up.
Actually, could you bump up your font size even more?
Yeah.
Like
it'll be one character per line.
Yeah. You should see the default font size I use. Like I feel like a grandpa because I have giant fonts. Like it's gotten bigger as I've gotten older.
Mm-hmm.
This part in the browser will make sense in a second. So yeah, there's my insertion point. So I'll start with the actions and I'll kind of work my way forward. I love React hooks because it gives you use reducer. So you don't need to use Redux. I mean, you can, but also you're shipping use reducer to your users already in the React bundle. So it's there. It does the same thing as Redux. So we might as well use it in my opinion. So this is the actions file, and this lives in the reducers folder. You can name it anything, but I named it that. Since it's a pretty simple app from a front-end standpoint, I've really only got one action, which is get the events list, and then I return that back out along with clear app state in case I want to clear that out. This is kind of cool. You can do a clean URL for WordPress API endpoint. But then, as Cory and I realized, if you haven't switched that on the WordPress side yet, your JavaScript isn't going to find anything. So this is a way to tell WordPress, like, always find the REST API. So if we hit that in the browser, you'll see this JSON response, raw and then readable over here. And this gives me all the events that I can parse through. So then I have the context.
Hey, and Nathan, real quick, before we move on too much,
Sure.
You got a question in the chat. Someone was wondering if you could just explain like use reducer and Redux. Ben Bash official was just, could you just explain that real quick for people
Sure.
that don't have that background?
So where you might normally have done, like you're familiar with, let me see, use reducer or Redux. Sorry, I'm just reading the comment. Yeah, so to use Redux, it's state management that sits outside of React. It was made by Dan Abramov, who is now on the React team. That was kind of his tryout for the React team, so to speak. They noticed him because of that and brought him on, and he works full-time on React now. And really, that's one of the first projects that got us started thinking about state management app-wide. Before you could pass down props, which would be callbacks, and then you could adjust internal state and then kind of propagate it back up the chain. Redux let you attach state management to, say, a great grandparent level of your code tree, and then like a great grandchild, where the intermediary layers might not have cared about it. But if you were doing that purely through props, you would have had to pass it all the way through each level, so to speak.
So
like
making changes everywhere.
Yeah. So if you think of like Matryoshka, the nested Russian dolls, right? Like passing props and then having callbacks that pass them back up. It's like you have to go through every level, whereas Redux enables you to say, attach it here, attach it, here, and then attach it here, where you leave like 2 levels out because it's not relevant, So think of a website where in the top right of the header, it might say that that's me logged in as Nathan. Then I want to go and edit my account. And so now in the page level, down in a form that's further down in the hierarchy of the whole page, I want to edit my email or my name or whatever. Only those 2 components in the whole page need to know about the app state. The rest is like just typical company-wide navigation or whatever sidebar content is being shown or ads. So Redux is a way to let you do that. It became so popular, and one of the concepts in Redux is reducers, which is just a fancy way of saying congeal all this disparate data into one object. That use reducer became a hook. Let me see. So where am I using this? So that basically lets you say, I want to pass in some initial app state, and then I want to use this reducer, which comes from my state file. And then it's going to give you back 2 things. It's going to give you back the state, and this is the way all hooks in React work. By the way, so if you get familiar with this, you're already familiar with like use state, any of the other hooks that React provides. So it's going to give you back the thing, and it's going to give you back the function to change the thing, basically. And you can name that whatever you want.
Yeah, and personally, because you'd mentioned almost a benefit that you don't have to use Redux, and like at least personally, I'm relatively new to React, and I always found Redux to be fairly confusing in a sense that like it felt like you had to write a decent amount of code to get done what you want to get done, and use reducer, at least to me, feels simpler.
Yeah, you still have to write some boilerplate, but it's your boilerplate. So I'll get to that in a sec, but like a lot of times you'll see people return a tuple, like an array with a named first thing and a named second thing. To use that, you would have to pull back in both. So instead, I'm returning an object. So that's kind of cool that you can pass whatever you want to your provider. So let me come over here. This might make a little bit more sense if we look at the state. So here's the Ajax. Kind of hold that in your head. Attempts to fetch some stuff, gets it, and then it sends it along to the save events list. And dispatch is going over here, and it's being passed in to create app actions there. So that's where that comes from. And then that's going to make changes to our state. So our app state reducer is here. On first run, or if nothing's passed in, we get default app state here, which just clone deeps this so that I'm not accidentally creating mutations on this object. We pass in an action object, and then on that action object is an optional payload and then type. So then I want to check if my type is clear app state, then I want to clear my storage. Storage here is just a little wrapper around local storage. And then I want to make my new state the default, basically reset to default. After getting the events list, I want to make sure it's of type save events list. I want to make sure it's actually an array, Because here, if I have like a 404 error, I might be getting some raw HTML back, and I don't want to stick that in my state. So I just do an extra check there. I update my new state, which up here is just a clone deep of my old state. And so I'm overwriting the event list. And we do that because if this grew in scope or we had a bigger React app, we would say new state dot other things would exist too. And we wouldn't want to overwrite those. Then I set the storage, and then I expose the state. So if I come in here, this is kind of cool. If I get speaker app state here, I come over here to the browser, and you can do this at home too. Do try this at home. Local storage.
You have to bump up the font size on that too for us to be able to see it.
All right, so let's do JSON parse this guy. That actually will take what I saved as a string, because window.local storage can only accept strings, and it'll change it back into a JavaScript object that we can inspect. So that's just a way for me to save it so that as I hit refresh, like even if I had no connectivity here, which I can't break it and show you because then I would drop off the call. But let's say,
Where did we go?
let's say I didn't have connectivity or whatever. Because I loaded this once already, it would be there even before this AJAX request comes back. It would just be a little stale because it's reading from local storage. Then as soon as it comes back, it updates the new cache. And so there's no like hold on to the cache for a certain amount of time. This is just there as a courtesy to make the page not completely empty while you wait for the AJAX to resolve.
So actually you could, in the network tab in the Chrome Dev Tools, there's a online thing you can simulate offline there.
Oh yeah, where do I go for that?
It's just to the left, up, now down.
Sorry. I zoomed in so much I have to full screen.
So next to there's a disable cache checkbox. So right under oh boy.
Oh boy.
We need a
on the,
feature where I can point at the screen,
Offline.
So you could offline, and then you should be able to refresh and basically simulate like you just went off the internet.
Oh no. Well, now the WordPress.
Oh yeah,
it really worked.
Yeah. But here, let's do this. Slow. Let's do slow 3G, right? So the HTML is going to come back. Scroll down. I think I flushed my cache. I said disable cache. I want cache in there. Anyway,
like
hand
wave
wave
fashion of anything that can fail will fail during a live demo. Yeah.
But yeah, so just as a nice way to, as the page loads, not just show nothing. You know, worst case scenario, they clicked on something and they couldn't apply because it was closed. You know, since the last time they visited the page. So yeah, let's see, constants, can close that. So the index, just, you know, the root JavaScript file in the page. I'm wrapping my app state provider, which I have from over here. I'm wrapping that around my, I'm just calling it React app. Like I would name this more specifically if the whole site was React, right? But just for ease of knowing what file you're in, since we have a React app running, I just named it that. So within our React app, let me full screen this.
I'm curious too. You've got quite a bit of comments in there. Is there like a certain style guide you follow for, like, is this like a convention that you use for all things you build?
It is for me, but it's not something I enforce. Like I'll see people check in stuff like this after they're cut and pasted, and I won't bother them, and I won't fail the PR, but I'll be like, yeah, I'm gonna make those equal because our ASCII art is off. What are we even doing? What's the point of this whole thing, right? No, that's just like me being nitpicky. I like to give a little bit more vertical space, you know, than just a single line comment. If it's like sections, so like here's my constants, you know, yay, you know, options, all right. And then like when I get down to the actual thing in the React file, like it's a component in case you didn't know, you know. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I actually like it because one thing that I struggle with React is because it kind of allows you to be like the Wild West, right? React doesn't enforce a whole lot of conventions that I actually kind of like things like style guides or things that enforce certain structures, just because I think it does help guide you through, just because React gives you very little of that out of the box. Yeah,
what's the saying? Be like strict in what you output and liberal in what you accept. So for me, this is I do it for myself, but
well, I like it because, you know, most of the time I'm whipping through a file, I'm doing it at Mach speed with my mouse, you know, button, just spinning the wheel as fast as I can go. So your multi-line idea right there for bigger concepts. I never thought of doing that, but I like it.
I also kind of like too that at a glance I can be like, okay, if that was a one-line comment, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but like that would be harder to tell.
But I can't see the 0.9 pixel font back there.
Well, anyways, what I'm seeing is that you can see that there's a little bit more of a visual vertical gap there.
Yeah.
So before I forget, Tanner Lindsley made this thing called React Table, which is like amazing. Like definitely go check it out, especially if you've been frustrated by data grids that are maybe all built in divs and you want a real table, or it presupposes a lot of styling and you find yourself fighting against it. So kind of hold that in your mind for a sec, and we'll come back to that. But that's what this columns array does. It's really cool, and that lets you pass string representations of what you're digging into for the data. And it just knows like event logo, and the first thing in that array is going to be the thing, or title.rendered, So I'll collapse that, just kind of get it out of the way. But those are the columns that are being passed to the table. And then I've got separate cell components. We can dig back into those a little later if you want. So I'll collapse that. So I got get options. This populates the dropdowns based on the data that Cory sends me back from the API. Oops. Because I don't like the React app that way can stay dumb. So if you send me back WordCamp, like DjangoCon, DrupalCon, whatever, I'll believe you, and those just become the things that go into the dropdown, rather than having a bunch of things in the dropdown that we've accounted for and having to do a code deploy of the React app when there's a new category added. So I kind of chew through these, make some dropdown choices that you can make. Here's like the blank, like, choose something blank. So I push those or unshift them into the start of the array. Then I make sure I don't have any duplicates, and then I expose that object here. Here's the filter function for when you're live typing. So if you type word, or if you type like Italy and it's in the title or it's in the location, I'll find it because I push those all into an array that I match against as you live type. So that took a little finessing, but not too bad. And then that way it can, find fuzzy matching kind of stuff. So yeah, basically that's the matching function.
So I'm curious, as you're going through here, the other than the first bit, what parts of this app are sort of unique to being built with WordPress? And I'd also be curious, like, what are the sort of things that, like, what sort of apps would be best built with React plus WordPress? Like, what sort of problems is it solving that you think it would do better than, Firebase or some other random tool that you want to use to build with?
I don't know that it does it better necessarily. I think for us, it's, all our server-side developers know WordPress in and out. And we're a WordPress VIP partner, so it kind of made sense to showcase, don't bite the hand that feeds you. So it's not that Firebase would do this worse, or that WordPress does it better, or even that Firebase would necessarily do it better, or WordPress does it worse. I think it has to do with the expertise you have in-house. For us, like Cory was saying, you can set up a custom post type that basically, when you submit an event, it becomes a blog post that then we show back as, a quote event, but it's our event type post, or post type of event. Is that right, Cory? So the specifics of it, I guess, would be that we're calling the WordPress API here. We're just using straight up REST here, and then, giving yourself an insertion point somewhere in your theme. So here, when Cory sets classes here, then we can change based on the CSS class that wraps the React app. We can change like positioning and stuff with just CSS there. So really, it's not even so much you need to do specifics with WordPress. It's it's just front end at that point.
That topic is an interesting topic because you say is one better than the other, but a lot of times as technical people, we tend to make arguments based upon the strength of technology alone. What I don't want lost in your comment there is what's the right choice for this application depends on something beyond you and the keyboard. There's really an ecosystem of skills and capabilities, and because of those, WordPress was the right choice. Could be other choices, but in your case, it sounds like based on your company, your skill history, Cory's inclinations, WordPress was the best choice. It doesn't mean everyone should stop what they're doing and use WordPress, but in your ecosystem, this was the right move.
And you must be doing something right, because thanks for Jay Matthias. Hopefully I'm saying that right, but thank you for the bits, and because Nathan Smith is awesome. So you've got at least one fan in the chat. I'm
going to agree with that, because I don't know if Nathan remembers this, but about 10 years ago, I was at an Adobe Max, and the way Max works is they have these little classes, these hands-on classes you could sign up for, and I didn't know anything about Photoshop. So I signed up for one, sat in the back, and the instructor was going to teach us how to use Photoshop, and Nathan was sitting next to me. I didn't know him at the time. And they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And they started from like the middle of knowing Photoshop, and I was clearly at the beginning of knowing Photoshop, and I kind of looked over at him with this bewildered look, and he spent most of the class teaching me how to follow through with the examples. And after that, I became a Nathan Smith fan, and that's why I've been following you on Twitter for ages and learning about 960 grids and dragging you on this show, because someone that would take time out of their class to help a poor soul like myself fumbling around with Photoshop, if I had a hat, I would take it off to you, sir.
Sorry, I had myself muted. The secret is I never actually got any good at Photoshop. I feel like I waited it out. Like I hobbled along with Adobe Fireworks, and like I could follow along with what the Photoshop guy was saying because Fireworks is similar enough, but then kind of waited it out. And now, there's a myriad of other tools that are vector-based that I don't have to know how to use Photoshop.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, in terms of like front-end architecture, I kind of think of front-end as the opposite of a multi-headed hydra in Greek mythology, where you cut off one head to grow back or whatever, and it's got all the heads in one body. Front-end, it's like you got one head. It's got to go through HTML, CSS, and JavaScript at some point, right? Before you maybe had two heads with Flash, but ripped Flash, and now there's just web standards. And so if you connect that to a WordPress body or a Ruby on Rails body or .NET body or whatever it may be, front end might not be like the most glorious thing. Like I'm not like serverless cloud cool Kubernetes dude, but like, it puts food on the table. And so I feel like JavaScript is a pretty good way to ensure my family continues to eat. So yay. So Cory, so I always tell my coworkers, like, Cory, like if you can give me JSON and I can send that back to you, like then we're good, So that's where I find myself. Yeah, do you want me to keep going through here, or?
Yes, I guess. Are there any last things
Sure.
you want to show from the code perspective?
Sure. So one of the most basic, or I would say bread and butter hooks from React is use state. And the nice thing about destructuring an array or an object is you can name it whatever you want. If this were an object, you would have to say like, and you wanted to name it something other than state, you would have to know the initial name. So it'd be like foo, and I want to rename it state, equals state or whatever. So this could be named anything. This function could be named anything. Same thing with use context. Or actually, sorry, use context is getting my specific context I made over here. Then I'm returning back an object here, so that if I just want to use the app state or I just want to use app actions, I can destructure it that way and not have to pull in both like this. But that's just so that's kind of off the beaten path. Like I'm probably like, if you're a React hooks purist, you're probably like, no, that should be an array, and you can fight me later, I guess. But I like doing a object there. So
yeah, I will say line 290 makes my brain hurt a little bit. What exactly is happening there?
Sure. So like all you really need, and this is probably just me being overly safe. My previous job was all TypeScript. And so you'd always define your types. And so this is my poor man's way of, without TypeScript, defining my types. This is really all you need to do. But if you've ever gotten the error of, you've tried to call like add event listener, and it will say like, function add event listener does not exist on null, or in this case would be undefined, right? So if you want to make sure that state is an object, so when you say state dot something, you can pass equal, and that's your fallback. So if for some reason use state was broken and the React team didn't do what they said and use state didn't work like it says on the tin, which then we've got bigger problems, then state would be an object and set state would be a function. So these basically never get called. These never.
Does it help like VS Code figure out like IntelliSense sort of things at all, or?
I don't even think you would have to, because useState has its own, like it ships with its own index.d.ts, and so it knows because the React team has taken the time to make this. It knows what it's expecting. Okay. So yeah, this is probably just me being overly cautious. But at a glance, I like stuff like that. Just so when I'm looking through, I'm like, okay, that's expecting an object, that's expecting a function. Gotcha. I even have a crazy. I've shown this to Cory a while back. A function called getDOM_fallback, where if I think I might not have a DOM element, but if I do, it's going to be a real DOM element. Then here's all the like typical stuff I would need to dot into, just so I can say like.
I can see that from like a testing perspective being handy though.
Like get this table, and if the table isn't there for some reason, then get DOM_fallback, and then that will have a parent node, or get DOM_fallback, stuff like that. Anyways, because occasionally you'll open a modal, and then you'll close it, and then React will be trying to do something with the element itself, and then it won't be there, and you'll bomb out. But if you have like just the DOM_fallback approach, or this type of thing, then you can call the method, and it won't do anything because it was a no-op anyways. So
now I think after this show, get DOM_fallback will be the most popular NPM dependency in 10 million frameworks by the end of the week.
Yeah, we can have like go overboard and just say like get browser fallback, where you just like I don't even know what's happening, right? I used window instead of global. Okay, well here's an entire browser complete API that does nothing. Yeah, you definitely you can get carried away for sure. So here's my filters. This is me kicking off my get events list. So when the data comes back, it will cause the React app component to re-render. So if you want to see some hilarity, forget to put in your list of dependencies here.
So infinite loop it.
Yeah. So then it's like, oh, I got data. I better go get data. Let's get data. Hey, have you heard of data? It's really cool. Let's get data. So watch, it'll just keep. Actually, do I need to turn off my simulation? Yeah, online.
Yeah, you want it to get that data in a loop as fast as possible.
Yeah. So
you wouldn't want that throttled.
What this does, useEffect is different than other React hooks in that it takes a list of dependencies that will cause useEffect, or cause this callback to get recalled if something within here changes. So if you pass an empty array, it'll say, hey, do this once, and then there's never going to be anything we care about. But if there was, you could say like every time food changes, every time bar changes, and every time like get DOM_fallback, is called or something crazy, then it would recall get data. And I typically split it out because sometimes you'll have, multiple things like it's something else. So rather than saying useEffect, because we could do it this way too. We could say app actions get event list, get something else. That'll do the same thing. But I find it easier just to have one useEffect, unless they, they don't share dependencies. Find it easier just to do it like that and add to the scope of get data. So then I get my options, which was above, that populates 2 select dropdowns. This is the filter based on whatever the user has typed. I'm checking if I have data or not. Just the handle change function for when you type in the filter, and then the return of the UI. This is cool. This is shorthand for this fragment. So I like doing that if I have a bunch of things, so I don't have to wrap it in an extra div. Oh, render. This is one of those things where like once I started doing this, I was like, man, I should have done this 5 years ago. You just pass a thing, and it's a prop called if, and then because if can't be a variable, I rename it isTruthy. So if it is truthy, send back the children wrapped in a React fragment, just in case there would be 2 siblings or whatever, because you can only have one thing that's ultimately returned. Otherwise, return null. So then that lets me keep it kind of simple. Like back in the handlebars days, you could just have a if statement in your JSX equivalent. So then I say render if show filter form. Then if there's a show filter form flag true, then I can say, show my options if they're there. that type of stuff. So render, this is like one of those little life hacks that has greatly improved my productivity and sanity, because otherwise you'd have to do what's in the React documentation, which has data.
I love this because I get into curly brace hell in React all the time. Because then like you got to nest those, right? Because you're going like 2 or 3 levels deep sometimes. And
the worst thing is like has data this, then that, else, or I didn't even do it right.
No, and in like real world apps with like real world scenarios, this gets out of hand. I mean, even I work on relatively simple apps, and even I've been in situations where it gets nuts, right? Like I don't even know what I'm parsing.
And I find that dangerous just in general, where if you do like const, I think this is Boolean, but not equals like, number or, falsy or whatever. So then I think my Boolean is a Boolean, and later on I'm like, if, equals false, but it's not, because if I logged it, it would really be just a falsy value, or whatever. So if we're going to do that logic anyways, let's just like have a loose check for truthiness in here, So if you take nothing else away from this stream and you're doing React, like make yourself a render function, or like we put it in the show notes or whatever. It's just this one little one-liner.
Do you have a blog post or something that we could link to? Because if not, you should totally write something up real quick.
I should.
It's a handy little tip.
I have a gist where it's like, hey man, like I pull people aside and one-on-one evangelize, like, hey, here's this render function. Like it's gonna change your life, bro. But I haven't.
If you get the gists, share it either with me or we can toss it in the comments so people can track it down.
Did you say gist, like GIF? I didn't realize we were getting into politics.
Oh no, definitely not politics. I thought you said gist, like GIST, like GitHub's little.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay.
All right, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
I thought I was gonna get kicked off the air.
Okay. No.
So yeah, then basically I say, hey, if there's no data, and there's also no filters applied, then I know there's no matches because, or if there are filters applied, then I know there's no matches because you filtered something crazy. If there's no filters and there's no data, then there would be no upcoming events, bad times or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of that. And then data table is my wrapper around the React table. It's basically just a bunch of hooks, which is really cool. So use pagination, use row select, use sort table. Like I won't go all the way in depth on this, but it's really cool, and that it lets you just spread. Let's see if I got some stuff spread here. So you can say row props. What are row props? Row props are get header group props, which are from here, which came from here, which comes from here, which came from use table. And so he's just got this really cool, like tons of really cool hooks that are everything you would need for a data table. So let me kind of inspect the DOM and I'll show you. So like role column header, I didn't write that myself. That's in the hook and it spreads as the props, Data is sortable. I think I did that one just for styling. Then if we drill down, let's drill down into actual row. So like role row group, that comes from the npm package, role row, role cell. And it might seem kind of redundant because it's role cell on a TD, but if you wanted to, you could build a React table based on absolutely positioned divs or flexbox divs or whatever. And this would keep it accessible because you're spreading the correct attributes from the React table project.
It's an interesting approach because like I'm sporting my Kendo React shirt, which I don't know if I can get in the camera here. And we've got a data grid as well. And our approach is slightly similar, well, I guess we don't use hooks as much for ours. Ours is more like your ways in are almost like extensibility. So by default, like you just give us data and we make a data table, but then we give you all sorts of options, but a lot of them are just component based. So we'll let you write like a custom cell, for example, that like we'll give you the base implementation and you can wrap it or do something for you if you need to configure it. So there's lots of little hooks where like we've broken ours into a bunch of sort of child components that you can overwrite and extend. So it's slightly different approach for a data grid.
No, yeah, I use Kendo with like Backbone and jQuery. So, and that's one thing I liked about this approach too. Where did I collapse it? Yeah, like this is very similar to how you guys would do like your function callback per cell, right? Like formatter, I think it was called. Or...
Yeah. It's like, it's funny because I mean, at the end of the day, you're building something similar. So like we would at least Reactisms, instead of passing in an array of columns, you'd pass in like individual, like there's a column component essentially,
gotcha.
more or less. But it's at the end of the day, you're accomplishing the same sort of thing.
Yeah. So shout out to Kendo UI. That saved me countless hours on previous projects for sure. And I think that's a good segue too into like just open source philosophy in general. I heard somebody say the other day, so this is not my original quote, but Jeff Bezos has philosophically said that if you can't feed a dev team with 2 pizzas, your Scrum team basically is too large. But the person was pointing out that what that leaves out is that we've each benefited from hundreds of thousands of calories worth of other people's pizza eating through open source. So like whether it's Kendo UI, that's a product you can use, it's fully got a bow on it, or it's something like the data table or the React table NPM project, like just being able to start like 500 hours ahead or 1,000 hours ahead on whatever you're building, because you don't have to be in the business of curating and making a data table is so cool. I was working on a banking client like 5 years ago, and React was like, I think it was like 0.14, and it hadn't like launched to 15 yet or whatever out of the gate. And I was making my own sortable data table, and like,
oh god, yeah,
it was interesting. I got it working to their satisfaction, but at the same time, I'm so glad that like there's communities around these type of things too.
I think like it's almost like a rite of passage for a web developer to try to build something like that. Like for me, it was trying to build my own date picker back in the day, and then like you go down the path, and it's something like you can do it, right? It provided the right amount of time and effort to do these things, but you realize what is, to your point of building off what other people have done, the depth of the problem when you start to get into the implementation of like, oh crap, like now I have to be accessible, and oh crap, there are mobile devices, and how is this thing going to work on there? And people want to globalize this all of a sudden, like throw in different languages. Dates work differently around the world. How do I like? It gets into a slippery slope. So the fact that, to your point, that you can find things that people have built out there already, especially in the React world, is pretty awesome.
Yeah, when I first heard about Canvas, I started making my own Canvas charting library, and then like somebody was like, "Oh, that reminds me of highcharts.com." I never touched my Canvas charting thing again because I was like, what I want is a chart. What I don't want to be is a charting library maintainer. So if somebody made it already, I'll use theirs,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's as far as I got. Yeah. But yeah, it's cool to, it's the worldwide take a penny, leave a penny kind of at the cash register, right? So even though your problem might seem niche, there's enough people out there with that same obscure problem on the internet that it's actually pretty huge if you scratch your own itch. So, or somebody scratched it for them, and then you are the passive beneficiary of that. So pretty cool. But yeah, that's it for the table. Then it just, basically renders a bunch of stuff. And then I have another component called horizontal scroll that it just wraps a div that lets you horizontal scroll stuff. I'll point this out. This is something I've been doing as a courtesy for components I expect others to use kind of in a generic sense. So, this is inside this table, but it's not specific to the table. But if you needed it to be, you could pass in a class name and you could pass in a style. And then if that exists, then I just attach that here. The class names project, which I'm sure you've heard of, but if you haven't and you learn about it, you're like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this wrong the whole time. You can basically just make an object of keys and values. Like this will always be on there. And then if there is a class name, I'll stringify it, and it'll get added based on the truthiness or falsiness of whatever you passed in. So then as a courtesy, you get the class you expect, and then whatever extra stuff you want. And then if you really needed to put a style on it, you could too.
I actually had not heard of that. So that's pretty awesome. I had always liked Angular had this syntax where you could bind to a, essentially you put brackets around and you could optionally do a class name sort of inline, like there was a built-in template syntax for doing that. And it always bothered me that React had no way of just like a quick inline way of optionally adding a class that doesn't like destroy the other classes that are applied.
Yeah, so this is super cool. You can just do this if you wanted to. If that's the case, you might as well just type it in your HTML or your JSX,
Yeah.
in my opinion. But what's really neat is the the truthiness or falsiness. You can also mix syntax. So you can like say string, comma, other thing, like that gets kind of messy. So I just always do an object if I do it at all. But yeah, it's super handy. And then you can dynamically build your strings too by putting them in square brackets for the key. So that's pretty awesome.
Very cool. Well, we're coming up on our time here, so I'll throw it to Chad. If you have any other questions you want us to tackle here, let us know. I know one thing I'm curious about is to bring it back to like be a speaker is what do you see yourself adding next? Like, what are your next steps to try to grow this thing?
I mean, at this point, next steps are to just kind of keep curating it, kind of keep the list growing, or keep the list of events available. We hadn't really thought. There's not really a roadmap as far as adding new features. I mean, one of the things that we thought about was maybe creating some sort of a way to standardize the way that events receive speaker submissions, but that's I think that's been done, and I don't know that that's necessarily something that we want to get into. I think really we kind of keep it simple and hopefully just make it something useful for the intended purpose, which is just to help people find opportunities to speak, and then help events find speakers.
Is there help you're looking for from the community beyond just referring events? Like, are you looking for contributions of code or functionality or anything like that?
At this time, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, ideas of what's missing or what could be added would be good. I think if it reached critical mass, we might open it up to direct code contributions. But for now, like, if you have events about, even if it's not your own event, just like it's a one you're going to attend and they have open call for speakers, like please add it and help us keep that list growing. And if there's features you want to see, for sure, let Cory know and he'll make me do it. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we are manually curating the events, the list of events, and so there's only so much we can do, right? As far as things that we know about, we'll add them ourselves if we can, if we know about them. I'll do the legwork on things like WordCamps, for example, to find existing or upcoming WordCamps to see if they have calls for speakers. But for the most part, like I don't know what Drupal events are out there. I don't know what Angular events are out there, and we're open to all of them, right? Currently it mostly just has WordPress and React events, but we're open to any kind of tech or any kind of event or with information that's relevant to the wider community.
Yeah, the sentiment you're talking about not knowing about these other events is exactly the point of this application. Let's get the wisdom of the crowds to build a clearinghouse, if you will, for events so speakers can figure out where their talents are best used.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, cool, guys. Is there anything else you wanted to chat about that we didn't get to? Did we miss anything super important?
I just sent in the private speaker chat the link to like the render documentation. I can share it real quick, and then we can probably wrap up after that.
Yeah, sounds good.
So yeah, basically, you were asking if there's anything written, and I was like, no, there's not. But then I remembered like we have our storybook out there. So here's like a simple example, and here's a more complex example. Like if the Avengers assembled, and if I am Iron Man 1, then Tony Stark saved the day. But if Thanos won, this would not be rendered because Thanos did not win. So that type of thing. So yeah, if you go to ui.reactivestudios.com, it'll redirect to the storybook, and then you can scroll down, read about render, go to the docs. If you say show code, then you can see how it's used.
Cool stuff. And I just put it as well. So if you want to follow up, there's a link there that you can follow and check this out. Well, thanks guys so much. If people want to follow you, if they want to keep up with this tool and whatnot, what's the best place to keep up with you guys?
Cory Webb Music for Cory. Just kidding. That I'm just joking. Because the initial tweet it auto-completed to a different Cory.
I'm sure Cory Webb Music is a great guy though, and if I could have got Cory Webb Music, I would have brought him on too. But
fun little fact: the guy from the band Semisonic's name is Dan Wilson, and so a couple times a year I get somebody thanking me for my music, and I make music, but nobody's thanking me for it. So I CC him, and he does his thing. It's kind of funny.
So I know a guy named Nathan Smith. He lives in Iowa, and he also does JavaScript. And I'm mutual friends with his coworkers. And so one day, like years ago before Slack, on Skype, his coworker reached out, had a problem. We kind of worked through it. And he said, thanks. By the way, I'm not going to be in the office on Monday. And I was like, this isn't Nathan in Iowa. And he's like, why did you help me? I'm like, I thought you knew who you were asking, and I knew the answer. So why wouldn't I help you? Like, yeah, help somebody out.
Awesome.
So if you want to follow Reactiv Studios, it's at Reactiv Studios on Twitter, and it's spelled, like if you see my shirt, it's spelled REAKTIV, and then Studios. That's our company. But if you want to follow Be a Speaker, it's on Twitter. It's BeASpeaker_AT, and you can follow us there to keep up. If we add any new events or anything like that, we'll certainly be tweeting them out there. Like I said, we try to amplify existing events and things that they've got going on, things that we know about. But yeah, that's where you can follow us. Yeah.
Well, cool. Thanks. I tossed those in the notes or the comments on Twitch, and we'll also toss them in when we toss this over to YouTube as well. Throw those in the description as well. I guess the last thing from my perspective, thanks everybody who showed up. If you're interested in React Wednesdays, if you go to the Code It Live page on Twitch, you can follow us, you can subscribe. Alyssa, my coworker, will actually be live in about 50 minutes to do some I think she's doing some CSS stuff today, so you can check that out as well. But we're here Wednesdays, 1 o'clock Eastern, so tune in. And thanks, guys, one more time. I appreciate it. Super cool tool.
Yeah, thanks, guys, for taking the time. I really appreciate it. It was very fun.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks for having us.
us.